Hello everyone, welcome to Odd Mystery Stories. Today I'm diving into a case that has haunted a family for over 2 decades, the disappearance of Alissa Turney. It's a story filled with pain, loss, and the lingering echoes of a justice system that, for some reason, has failed to deliver. In July of 2023, a significant chapter in this long, heartbreaking tale was seemingly closed when Michael Turney, Alissa's stepfather, was cleared of the charges related to her murder. This decision came 22 years after Alissa, then a high school junior, vanished without a trace. Her body has never been found, and the questions surrounding her disappearance continue to torment those left behind. Join me for the odd and mysterious disappearance of Alissa Turney. For James Turney, Mike's son and Alissa's brother, the outcome is a bitter pill to swallow. In his eyes, there is no doubt about what happened to his sister. There is no justice in the system for her, James said in a candid interview with NBC News. It failed her 100%. James has been very vocal in shedding light on a type of abuse that, while often misunderstood, is disturbingly prevalent: coercive control. According to James, Alissa was subjected to this form of abuse for years. It wasn't just physical violence, but a more insidious form of control: intimidation, constant surveillance, and psychological manipulation. These are the tools that Mike Turney allegedly used to exert power over Alissa, creating an environment where she felt trapped and helpless. Coercive control, as first defined by a social worker, Evan Stark, is like a hostage situation. It's not just about dominating someone physically, but erasing their sense of liberty, their freedom to live as they choose. Stark describes it as a predictor of fatal violence, a red flag that should never be ignored. James Turney is calling out Arizona prosecutors for downplaying what experts have called a textbook case of coercive control. Despite the overwhelming evidence of psychological torment that Alissa endured, the legal system has, in James's view, failed to recognize the severity of what happened. The story of Alissa Turney's disappearance and the trial of Mike Turney is not just a personal tragedy, it's also a stark reflection of the gaps in the legal system when it comes to recognizing and prosecuting coercive control. James Turney, Alissa's brother, has become an advocate for reform, pointing to countries like Scotland as a beacon of hope. In Scotland, coercive control has been recognized as a criminal offense, codified into law to protect victims from this often invisible form of abuse. Judicial training and victim support are integral parts of this system, providing a framework that James believes the United States should adopt. He sees this as a necessary step to prevent others from suffering the same fate as his sister. Some progress has been made in the United States. In states like California and Connecticut, laws have been enacted allowing victims to cite coercive control in civil matters, including petitions for protection orders. Hawaii has also taken steps by classifying the abuse as a misdemeanor. However, these efforts are still few and far between, and for many victims, the legal recognition of their suffering remains out of reach. Despite widespread allegations against him, Michael Turney, now 75, was charged with second-degree murder in connection with Alissa's disappearance. However, the trial in a Phoenix courtroom ended in his acquittal after 6 days. Mike's defense team argued that there wasn't substantial evidence to support the charge, and the judge ultimately agreed. Mike Turney has never been charged with any crimes related to abuse and coercive control allegations. In a revealing interview with NBC's Dateline, he denied ever abusing Alissa. He did, however, admit to being a controlling parent, claiming that his actions were necessary because Alissa needed, as he said, constant supervision. This admission, while troubling, has not resulted in any legal consequences. Mike Turney's claims of being a protective parent took on a disturbing tone as more details emerged about the extent of his control over Alissa. In an interview with NBC's Dateline, Mike described his daughter as very naive and easily influenced, implying that his actions were necessary to safeguard her from potential dangers. He painted a picture of a well-meaning father trying to protect a vulnerable teenager who, tragically, had lost her mother when she was only in the second grade. But according to James Turney, his father's narrative was far from the truth. As the second oldest in a blended family of 6 children, James saw his father as a master manipulator who routinely belittled Alissa. Mike would often call her stupid and not that intelligent, words that cut deeply and revealed a much darker side of his parenting. The control Mike exerted over Alissa went far beyond harsh words. He had installed an extensive surveillance system inside their suburban Phoenix home. Cameras and recording devices were strategically placed, capturing phone calls and video footage. One particularly invasive camera was hidden inside an air conditioning vent in the living room, a place where the family should have felt safe. These recordings revealed a father who not only disparaged his daughter, but used expletives to describe her, further eroding any sense of security she may have had. Mike's control extended beyond the walls of their home. He once saw Alissa kissing someone who wasn't her boyfriend through one of the hidden cameras. Instead of addressing the issue privately, he chose to reveal this information to her boyfriend, accusing Alissa of cheating. William Anderson of the Phoenix Police Department, a detective who led the investigation into Alissa's disappearance, described these actions to Dateline, noting how Mike's obsession with monitoring his stepdaughter went to extreme lengths. Mike would often appear at Alissa's workplace, a jack-in-the-box, where he would sit in his car and film her. Detective Anderson highlighted how Mike would routinely arrive an hour or two early to ensure she didn't leave with anyone else. It's very much over the top, Anderson remarked, emphasizing the suffocating environment that Alissa lived in. As the investigation into Alissa Turney's disappearance deepened, so did the conflicting accounts of what truly transpired within the walls of the Turney household. Mike Turney vehemently denied the more disturbing accusations, insisting that his actions were rooted in concern rather than control. In his interview with Dateline, Mike called it a lie that he disclosed Alissa's supposed cheating to her boyfriend. He claimed that his initial filming of Alissa at her job was at her own request. She wanted to be recorded at her first job, he said. However, he admitted that his surveillance continued because he suspected she was giving her phone number to men at the drive-thru. These suspicions, according to Mike, justified his continued monitoring of Alissa's movements. Regarding the hidden camera inside the air conditioning vent, Mike provided another explanation. He said it was installed because someone had attempted to break into their home while the children were alone. In Mike's view, the camera was a necessary precaution, not an invasion of privacy. The disparaging comments he made about Alissa, he added, stemmed from his discovery that she was engaging in behavior he disapproved of, using drugs, having sex, and lying to him. To Mike, these revelations justified the harsh words he used to describe his stepdaughter. But those who knew Alissa offered a different perspective. Chris Ridnour, a co-worker of Alissa's, remembered her as a friend who might have been giving out her number, though he never witnessed it himself. He also didn't know her to be someone who slept around or even used drugs. What Chris did notice, however, was a clear difference in Alissa's demeanor when she was away from home. She seemed bothered by her home life, Chris told Dateline. But when she was at work, it looked like she was happier, like she was away from whatever it was. This contrast between Mike's account and the observations of those who knew Alissa paints a complex picture of a young girl caught between the pressures at home and the search for normalcy in the outside world. As the story of Alissa Turney unfolds, these conflicting narratives continue to raise more questions than answers. As the investigation into Alissa Turney's disappearance unfolded, more unsettling details emerged, casting a darker shadow over her relationship with her stepfather, Mike Turney. Several people who knew Alissa came forward with allegations of abuse, painting a harrowing picture of her life at home. One of the most chilling accounts came from Alissa's then boyfriend, along with two other sources, who told investigators that Alissa had described a terrifying incident where Mike drove her to the desert and touched her inappropriately. This allegation, according to Detective William Anderson, was one of many that raised serious concerns about what was happening behind closed doors. In another interview obtained by Dateline, a friend of Alissa's recounted a disturbing event that Alissa had confided in her. According to this friend, Alissa woke up one night to find Mike gagging her with a sock. He allegedly told her to remain quiet about the incident, warning her that no one would believe her if she ever spoke out. Despite the gravity of this accusation, Mike has consistently denied any wrongdoing. The troubling reports didn't stop there. Alissa's third-grade teacher also came forward, revealing that Alissa had once confided in her that she was having sex with her father. However, the teacher didn't report the allegation to authorities at the time because Alissa quickly retracted her statement, perhaps out of fear. The teacher did confront Mike about the claim, and he denied it, dismissing Alissa's words by saying that she believed sex is when people kiss each other goodnight. A year before Alissa vanished, Mike took a preemptive step that in retrospect appears deeply manipulative. He contacted Child Protective Services, warning them that his stepdaughter might falsely accuse him of molestation. This preemptive move was followed by an even more bizarre action. Mike made Alissa sign a notarized contract entitled "My Statement About Things in My Life at Home," in which she declared that he hadn't abused her. Detective Anderson explained that Mike had made her sign other contracts as well, focusing on drug use and behavioral issues. To Detective Anderson, this notarized document was a clear form of humiliation and intimidation. It allowed Mike to hold something over Alissa, a piece of paper that he could use to silence her. With this document, Anderson said, Mike could turn around and say, "You can never accuse me of any of these things because you've signed your life away." As more information came to light in the investigation into Alissa Turney's disappearance, Mike Turney provided his own explanations for his actions. Attempting to reframe the narrative around the controversial contracts he had made Alissa sign. According to Mike, these contracts were intended to give Alissa structure in her life. He said, if you told Alissa something within an hour or so, she didn't remember it, portraying the notarized document as a means of protecting himself from what he claimed were Alissa's false allegations. Mike also asserted that Alissa had been threatening him with Child Protective Services as part of an effort to emancipate herself from the family. When asked directly if he had sexually abused Alissa, Mike adamantly denied the accusation. "I never did, and I would never do anything like that," he said, rejecting the allegations that had surfaced during the investigation. It took years for prosecutors to file criminal charges related to Alissa's disappearance. Initially, authorities believed that Alissa had simply run away, which delayed the case. Additionally, investigators faced the monumental task of sifting through the voluminous audio and video evidence that Mike had accumulated over the years. However, when Mike was finally indicted for second-degree murder in 2020, the sex abuse claims became central to the prosecution's theory. Prosecutors from the Maricopa County Attorney's Office alleged that Mike feared Alissa would reveal the abuse, which, they argued, provided a motive for her disappearance. But this critical piece of the prosecution's case was thrown into jeopardy when the judge ruled that the sex abuse claims were hearsay, barring prosecutors from discussing them during the trial. This ruling significantly weakened the case against Mike. Mike, for his part, maintained that the motive presented by the prosecution was, quote, fabricated, and based on lies told by people that say Alissa said this or Alissa said that. His legal team echoed this sentiment, arguing that the case against Mike was thin on real evidence. One of the lawyers, Jamie Jackson, told Dateline, "For me, it was an immediate wow. There's very little physical evidence, obviously in this case, or none, and it seems that this all became kind of a character assassination." In the years following Alissa Turney's disappearance, suspicions within her own family grew stronger, ultimately leading to a painful conclusion shared by all of Mike Turney's 5 other children. They believe he is responsible for Alissa's disappearance. Among them, Alissa's half-sister, Sarah Turney, has been the most vocal, driven by a fierce determination to seek justice for her sister. Sarah's fight for justice began with a campaign that started at the urging of detectives, who advised her to bring more attention to Alissa's cold case. Utilizing the power of social media, Sarah launched into a series of viral TikTok videos that captured the attention of tens of millions of viewers. Her efforts quickly gained momentum, leading to an online petition that garnered nearly 300,000 signatures, all urging for a murder trial against her father. This public outcry, coupled with the increasing pressure from Sarah's relentless campaign, eventually led to a trial in July of 2023. However, the trial did not bring about the outcome Sarah had hoped for. Despite this setback, Sarah continued her advocacy, creating the podcast Voices for Justice, to keep Alissa's case in the public eye and to share her sister's story with the world. I would certainly encourage you to consider listening to her podcast. I'll put a link in the comments below. Sarah's journey toward believing in her father's guilt was not immediate. Initially, she couldn't fathom the possibility that her father might be capable of murdering her sister. But as Sarah later revealed in an interview with People, for me, it was kind of like a switch. As the evidence mounted, Sarah became convinced that her father was the reason her sister was, quote, gone forever. In 2017, driven by her own growing suspicions, Sarah secretly recorded a meeting with her father, hoping to coax a confession from him. During this tense conversation, Sarah pleaded with him to tell her the truth about what had happened to Alissa. Mike's cryptic response only deepened her suspicions. He said, "Be there at the deathbed, Sarah. I will give you all the honest answers you want to hear." Sarah's efforts to reignite the interest in the case, combined with the chilling audio recording from her 2017 meeting with Mike, eventually led to a significant development. In August 2020, Mike Turney was arrested and indicted by a grand jury on charges of second-degree murder in connection with Alissa's disappearance. While the trial may not have ended as Sarah hoped, her relentless pursuit of justice ensured that her sister's story was heard by millions and that the search for the truth continues. To Evan Stark, the author of the 2007 book, Coercive Control: How Men Entrap Women in Personal Life, Alissa Turney's case seemed to be a textbook example of the very abuse he had studied for years. Stark, who was not previously familiar with Alissa's case, reviewed the allegations for the NBC News and found the evidence compelling. He pointed to the surveillance, the contracts, and the other aspects of Mike Turney's behavior as clear indicators of coercive control. He said, "Once you put all of these elements together, even if you don't have physical violence, you have the elements of coercive control crime because you've taken away someone else's liberty." Stark explained he added that coercive control that ends in a homicide indicates a failure of the pattern of abuse, a tragic end to a calculated strategy of domination. In Arizona, however, coercive control is not recognized as a criminal offense. Despite this, James Turney firmly believed that this form of abuse defined his father's relationship with Alissa. James worried that the jury in his father's trial wouldn't understand the connection between what might appear to be a series of unusual behaviors and the brutal, systematic abuse he believed Alissa endured. This included Mike's constant surveillance, his disparaging comments, and his efforts to control every aspect of her life. During the trial, Maricopa County prosecutor Vince Imbordino stated in his opening remarks that Mike, quote, attempted to basically control every part of Alissa's life. But for James, who attended the trial, this assertion fell short. He felt that the prosecutors failed to connect the dots between the various aspects of his father's behavior. The surveillance, for example, was presented not as a pattern of abuse, but merely as a strange quirk. James remembered his frustration vividly. He had pleaded with the prosecutors to call expert witnesses who could help the jury understand the dynamics of coercive control and how these behaviors, when viewed together, painted a picture of ongoing abuse. "Why is no one putting all of this together?" he recalled, asking the prosecutors. "Why are we not showing that this is a pattern of events? Stop saying individual isolated things. You need to connect them." To James, it was crucial to demonstrate that the abuse Alissa experienced was not just a series of bad parenting decisions, but a systemic attempt to strip her of freedom and autonomy. This wasn't a one-time bad parenting decision, James emphasized. This was something that was going on throughout her life. Determined to see justice for his stepsister, James Turney took matters into his own hands, enlisting the help of a forensic psychologist relative to line up possible experts who could testify about coercive control. He even emailed the prosecutors potential lines of questioning that could illuminate the abusive dynamics between Mike Turney and Alissa. But despite his efforts, James's suggestions were declined. The prosecutors, according to James, felt it wasn't necessary and it wouldn't be effective. In a later interview, Maricopa County prosecutor Vince Imbordino shed light on the reasoning behind this decision. He believed that James wanted testimony related to coercive control to help establish a motive for the alleged murder. He said, "That wasn't our problem. We already had a motive." The role that expert testimony might have played in the case remains unclear. However, after the prosecution rested its case and before closing arguments were presented, Mike Turney's defense team argued that there was a lack of physical evidence to support the charge of second-degree murder. The judge ultimately agreed, ruling the prosecution hadn't put forward substantial evidence to warrant a conviction. As a result, Mike Turney was acquitted of second-degree murder. While prosecutors disagreed with the judge's decision, they accepted it. Imbordino acknowledged that the statute of limitations on other potential charges, such as stalking and entrapment, had expired, leaving them with no further legal avenues to pursue against Mike. To Evan Stark, the decision not to include expert testimony on coercive control was a critical mistake. one that could have had far-reaching implications not only for raising awareness about coercive control through a high-profile trial, but also for potentially altering the case's outcome. Stark believed that an expert could have reframed what appeared to be relatively trivial behaviors, such as the constant surveillance, as part of a broader pattern of malevolent conduct. This pattern, Stark argued, was designed to dominate and deprive Alissa of her liberties, her dignity, and ultimately culminating in her disappearance and presumed death. Though Mike Turney was acquitted, James remains convinced that his father is responsible for Alissa's death. The motivation behind this alleged crime remains unclear to James, but one memory continues to haunt him. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, Alissa expressed a desire to leave her father's home. She confided in James that she wanted to move in with him, saying, "She couldn't take living with my father anymore. She was afraid of him." Mike Turney, however, denied that Alissa feared him. In his interview with Dateline, he expressed uncertainty about what had happened to his stepdaughter. "I have no idea where Alissa is, alive or dead," he said, maintaining that he was as much in the dark as anyone else. Mike Turney filed a missing persons report on May 17, 2001. But in the immediate days following Alissa's disappearance, police did not suspect foul play, and no police investigation took place. In 2006, self-proclaimed serial killer Thomas Albert Heimer told prison guards that he had killed Alissa. He had been in prison since 2003 for an unrelated murder. However, when Phoenix police questioned Heimer, they ultimately determined that he had not had any contact with Alissa, and he admitted he might have confused her with a different victim. In 2008, the case was reopened. In December 2008, detectives told Sarah that her father was their main suspect. Simultaneously, authorities were raiding the Turney home, where they seized more than 24 improvised explosive devices, 19 firearms, 2 homemade silencers, and a van full of gasoline. They also found a manifesto outlining his plans for a rampage against the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers building in Phoenix. Michael Turney was arrested, prosecuted, and sentenced to 10 years in jail. He was released in August of 2017. As I close out the chapter on this story, our hearts are heavy with the compassion for Alissa Turney and the family she left behind. The pain of losing a loved one is profound, but the agony of living without answers is even more unbearable. Alissa's disappearance has left a void in the lives of those who knew her, and those who have come to know her through the tireless efforts of her siblings, Sarah and James Turney. Both Sarah and James have channeled their grief into a relentless pursuit of truth and justice for Alissa. Their journey has not been easy, marked by frustration and heartbreak, yet their resolve remains unshaken. Sarah's public advocacy has brought Alissa's story to light, while James has sought justice, driven by the memory of his sister and the belief that her story deserves to be told. To Sarah and James, and all the families who continue to wait in the shadows of uncertainty, we extend our deepest empathy and respect. May your request for the truth be met with the answers and peace you so deeply deserve. Alissa's story is a poignant reminder of the need for justice, the power of family, and the enduring hope that one day the truth will prevail. Thank you once again for watching my video. My name is Vince. Would you please consider supporting my channel by either buying me a cup of coffee at my Patreon account link below, or even treating yourself to some merchandise at my online shop. I truly appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this story, you might also enjoy the Feeney family story. You will find that link to the story in the upper right corner of your screen. Click there to see that story. Thank you.